everyone, I'm Anna and this is the R5 Leather Workshop, where today we're going to learn how to take your basic strap for a handbag or a tote and upgrade it to something that is fancy and makes your bags look a little more luxury. Also, how cute is this little totally impractical bag? So let's talk about the tools we're going to need, along with some of the ones that we tend to use all the time, like stitching chisels and the hammer. There's a few other ones I just want to make sure that you have on hand. You might want to use a die to dye your edges. You're going to need a burnishing tool. You're going to need your scratch awl, a ruler, and a rotary blade or X-Acto knife. The next thing you're going to need is the leather to make your straps. So first things first, what you're going to need is think about what size, what length of strap you want on the final bag. In my case today, I am making a 13-inch strap. So whatever the length of your strap, you need to add 4 inches to that. So I want a 13-inch strap in my final product. Therefore, I need a 17-inch piece of leather. So the piece of leather needs to be 2 inches wide, and then the length of your final handle plus 4 inches. That's the first thing you need there. And then you need some sort of filler to create that rounded look that we want to have. You can use leather piping, which is a little more expensive, but then your whole project is leather. The other option is nylon rope. That is what I'm going to be using today. I bought this when I first started trying to learn this technique, and it was cheaper, so that's what I went with. It works just fine. There's nothing wrong with this. Probably when I run out of this, I will go to leather piping, to be honest, but I don't want to waste this. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take your piece of leather. I know mine's a little curved because of where it came off the hide. You probably don't want it to be slightly curved like this. Preferably you want it to be a nice straight piece, but I'm working with what I got here today. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to draw a line 2 inches in on either side. So in this case, I'm going to line these up. This is one of the reasons I really love the rotary mat and the ruler together, because I can really just square everything up really nice. You can take your scratch awl and make a mark. I've seen some people do this with a pen, especially if you are using a leather that maybe doesn't scratch real well. You can use a marker to mark this. So we're going to mark both sides. Yeah, 2 inches in. Okay. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is to draw a center line down the middle. Because this is 2 inches, that means the center line will need to be 1 inch in. One of the reasons why you want the straight piece, not the slightly curved one that mine is. I am going to make it work though. So there's my line, and it doesn't actually need to run perfectly down the middle. You'll see why we need that though. So the next thing you're going to want to do is cut the piece of piping that you want. Now, I like the piping to overlap a little bit from the 2 inch line. So you don't want a 13-inch piece or whatever length of your final handle. I tend to go about 1 inch bigger than that. So this one will be 14 inches, and you'll see why in a moment. Okay, so now you've got these two things here. The next thing you're going to need is a paintbrush and your leather glue. So one of the things I saw in other tutorials when I was preparing for this video, some people actually have you put the glue down the center and then put some glue on this, let that dry, because this is contact cement, let it, dry to tacky, then they put that down and then they put glue on either side. I have a much faster way. You actually don't need to do that. I have made multiple of these handles recently as I, again, prepared for this video, and literally you just don't need to do that. What I learned was you can just use glue all the way. Now you do not want to put glue, by the way, in these sections that we marked off, these 2 inch in sections. So only in this section here do you want to put glue, but you do need to put glue on all of it. Try very hard to get to the edges. You definitely want to get glue to your edges here. Super important on this particular project. I should note that these handles look really nice, and they are not particularly hard in my opinion to make, but they are time consuming. I think that's the biggest issue with this. And if you're making bags to be sold, you really have to consider the pricing that you're going to put on here. Honestly, if I was putting these on all the bags that I sell, I would honestly add at a minimum $50 to the price of the bag, probably more like $70, because you have to completely hand stitch this. They use more leather than the other style strap. And so they just take more time and more resources. And it's just the reality of it. I would maybe if I was to start incorporating more of this style of handle onto the bags I sell, especially if it was a custom order, I would give them the option and say they just cost more, but just be aware of it. So now that we've put the glue down, this is where, like I said, you don't need to, because this is still wet. It's not at that tacky put it together part. You can now just put this down on top of it. And this nylon, for some reason, will still stick to it even before it's dry. So that is not even. Also, at this point, you can move it. It's kind of nice. Okay, so I try to get this as even as I can. All right, now you do need to let this dry to that tacky finish before we move on. So I want to make a quick point about the bottom sides of the handle. So the ones we're doing today are going to look like this, where they're squared off. We're actually going to probably curve these a little bit. So when you do it this way, the way we're doing it today, you can just curve these off, and then when you attach them and stitch them, which I'll show you in a minute. The other thing you can do is you can create a template, and the design that you want, this is the section that will attach to the bag, that will stitch to the bag. You can create a template. This section is 2 inches long, 2 inches wide, with the neck coming down at about 1 inch right here. And then this would be the remaining of your strap. So you only need to put this on the end. You can see here on this other one that I'm working on how I've drawn this out already for this other strap that I'm doing. But the whole procedure that you've seen works for this. You just have to pre-draw out your design for the connection point ahead of time. I made this myself. I just drew several different designs and tested them on scrap leather that I had to see if I liked them. Once I figured out the one I wanted, I went back through and redrew just half of it, folded this, and then cut it out with scissors. Never knew those elementary school skills with scissors would work out like that to create this template. There are some websites and Leathercrafters that actually will post pre-made patterns for these. And if they're like $1 or so, they might be worth buying. I saw one though that was like $15, and I was like, I would never buy that. Take the time, sit down, scribble out some ideas. I'm sure you got scrap leather, and to create the design that you want, and then just make a little template. So, little side trick there. So now that this is dry, or in my case mostly dry, you're going to roll this handle together. So this is where it gets tricky, and this is probably the one part where I'm saying go slow, take your time connecting all this together. So you're going to start and you're going to pull this together, and you're going to make sure that everything's lined up. Also, why these lines are important. So you're going to want to make sure right there that that line comes together, and you're going to want to work slowly across, making sure that these two sections are flush with each other. So work your way across and go slow. All right. So, and every once in a while I'll kind of rub my finger across and go, okay, I'm good. Sometimes it's not always the easiest to see what you're doing. Once you get started with this first set, like the first inch or so, most of it kind of almost comes together without much thought. It just naturally kind of will come together right there and be flush with the two sides. And there we go. So then from here, you're going to take your burnishing tool that you have, or I have this kind of flat burnishing tool, which I prefer for this, but a regular one will work. You're going to push the leather in right where the cording starts, or the piping, whatever you used, and you're going to just keep kind of roll across. And this serves two purposes. This is actually creating your stitch line instead of normally using the wing dividers. This actually is creating your stitch line. That's where we're going to punch our holes to stitch this. So you're going to go all the way across. I usually kind of push it against my hand to make sure it's really flush against there. You want that nice and flush against that piping that you put in there. That piece isn't quite. And then I flip it over and do it again on the other side. It's usually a little faster on side two because you've already done one side, but you do want to do both sides. All right, and see it's starting to come together like a handle. Pretty cool, huh? So then from here, you're going to want to punch. Usually the second side that you crease down is got a little better line. So then from here, you're going to grab your stitching chisels, and right where your 2-inch mark started, your original 2-inch mark, you're just going to, that's where you're going to start. So the other thing about punching these is you don't want to punch straight down. You actually want to go at an ever so slight angle. And this is because of the way the curved piping is in there. So if you want it to go actually straight through on the other side of the piping, you need to be at a slight angle. It's not much of an angle. I mean, mine's, I don't know how many degrees that is, but it's not much. And I lost my hammer. Don't know why it was way over there. Okay, so you're going to put this down and then punch it all the way across. So now you have all of your holes punched, and you can go ahead and stitch that. So remember, you're going to need your blunted needles and your wax thread to go ahead and stitch this. Again, I'm not going to show you me stitching all this. It's going to take me a little bit of time to stitch through this. So if you want a tutorial on how to do stitching, I have made one of those. I will link it below, and it looks like this. Okay, so now that our stitching is done, you have a few more things you need to do. So our stitching is done, and if you notice, this is a pretty wide section here. You do want to make sure you do it this way. You don't want to try to just hope that it'll match and make like an inch. You want the excess, and you're going to trim it now and trim it after, okay? So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to realize that you only want to trim this part. You don't want to trim this. We want this here. So you're going to want to mark at that 2-inch mark and slice that on both sides. Okay, there you go. And again, me and my love of the acrylic ruler. I know it's not everyone's love. If you love the cork back metal ones, I understand it. I get it. I get the hype. It's just not my thing. Okay, now this way. Okay, I gotta do this in a way that's comfortable. Always remember to cut things in a way that's comfortable for you. Don't try to do an awkward movement because you will make mistakes. So I usually leave, so I'm cutting about 1/4 inch of this off in the end. Okay. And with any type of ruler, and this is just the way that works for me, so make sure you cut in a way that's comfortable for you. Whenever I do this, you still have to be careful. So like this came out a little bit there. Here we go. I have actually freehanded this before. I don't recommend it, but I have done it. Okay. So your handle now is basically done. We need to just clean up a few things to make it look a little nicer. And then I will show you how to attach it to your bag, or at least the best way I found. So as you can see, there's these funny little wings. I do not like those. On here, another one of my snazzy tools that I really like. This is a for the edges. So I'm going to just clean up these edges here. And that way you can just stitch. You'll see when we stitch. There's so much stitching in this project that's something you need to be aware of. When you're doing this much stitching, it's more labor intensive. Another reason why I would probably charge an extra $70 for these to be on my bags. So as you can see, that looks much nicer than this other end. So I'm gonna go do the other one and then I'll show you how to assemble onto a bag. So there we go. There is our handle. It is all ready to go onto our bag. So when I talked about in my tote video, I showed you that you didn't really have to attach handles before assembling the final bag. In this style handle, that is not the case. You need to assemble them ahead of time. I watched several videos of other leather crafters and even people who were attaching handles like fabric ones. And one of the things I discovered is there's different techniques. So, go research those videos yourself if you don't like the way I'm assembling these. But this is the way that I personally have found works really well for me. So this is a tote bag I am working on. So I like my straps to be about 6 inches apart. So this bag is 15 inches apart. I'm gonna line this up with my rotary mat, okay? So the halfway point here would be 17.5 inches, which is right there. And then I like mine being about 6 inches apart. So I'm actually going to, for the sake of my own measurements, and in this case, you want them about 2 inches down. So these are 2 inches down. It's off a 1/2 inch because I'm using the 8 here as my center. And I like them 6 inches apart. So 1, 2, 3. So one handle needs to go there. And then here's my 8, 1, 2, 3. The other one goes there. Okay, so I have 2 little dots there. From here, you need to kind of decide how you would like yours to look. So in the case of this totally impractical little tote guy that I made with these handles, because these connection points need to be closer together here, I angled them out a bit so that this handle was bigger. So you have to kind of just mess with your layout a little bit. So in this case, I am probably going to, so if I do them, so my dots are here, do I want to put them, you know, on either side? Do I want, you know, do I want this to be the center point of those? You know, do I want to put it there? Do I want to do like I did with that other one and kind of angle them in and give this kind of curved look? So these are all the little things you have to think about before you kind of do your actual attachments. I think in this case, I am going to do them pretty much dead center. So, and I'm going to do kind of like the dot is roughly the center point here. So I'm going to lay this down. So this is roughly where I want it. And I'm going to take my scratch awl and scratch ever so lightly around the edge. I don't want to do it too strongly, mostly because you don't want it to show through, but enough that when I release it, you can see it. And the same thing on the other side. Oh, that one's going to be right there. So then you're going to line that one up, and you want to make sure they're the same. Again, this is the most practical way I've done it. Some people will actually pre-punch everything. This one is not straight. That's why you do it evenly, like I said. Okay. So these are where they're gonna go. So that's marked. So from here, what I like to do is, I don't like to glue these down. You very easily could. You could just kind of, when you're putting glue on leather like this, you do tend to have to scratch it a little bit so that the glue will actually stick. So what I like to do when preparing these is I actually like to use Ted's tape. You could totally use glue. Just remember that you don't necessarily put glue in the middle, just around the outside and around the outside of this before you set it down. And you would need to scratch this. Bear that in mind. I like to use Ted's tape. So I just kind of lay a piece down. So I lay these down in here like that, and then lay them on the inside, okay? I also stitch these one at a time. So I'm gonna lay this one down. So I'm gonna lay it down. The other reason I like this too is that if you mess up, you can fix it. That's one of the things I like about Ted's tape. Okay, so there is the first handle piece. Oh, wrong side, see? Again, I did the wrong side. There. See, that's why you use Ted's tape, right there, for mistakes like that. Okay, so the other thing you can do if this is bothering you over here, you can always clip it down. So then from here, what I do is I grab my wing dividers now. And I make sure that I go as far up as I feel like I can with my wing dividers. You want to stitch up as close as you can to where the stitch in the handle itself is. That's awkward. And again, this is my standard 1/4 inch that I always do. Okay. So Again, I'm gonna butt this up as close as I can into the handle itself for my first punch. There's the first one. Ah, yes, I can use my 4 or my 5 hole. Okay, maybe only for that one. And you're gonna punch all the way around. Okay, so now that I've punched this, I'm gonna go ahead and stitch this all the way around, and then we'll do the same thing on the other side. So as you can see here, this handle is assembled on both sides, and blah, 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 blah. So I've assembled the first side of this handle, and as you can see, it's so much more elegant than like a standard strap. Again, this is much more time consuming. I had to do all the stitching here, and obviously we have to do the other side. And obviously we still have to assemble the other side. But then once you put these on, you can just assemble this like any other tote. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's really fun to learn things to upgrade your handles, or just upgrade and just make your leather work so much more refined, and as you grow in the skill to get these different, you know, techniques down. So again, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time.